witches, mystics, sages, elders, and children alike. Thank you for coming back, first of all. Secondly, what I'm talking about today is exactly what my title says. Um, I'm going to discuss how I believe our ancestors knew what will become of us, and I could even go so far as to say they assisted in the orchestration of it. So today we're going to talk about that. If you're mad about what I just said, you may want to wait until this video is over to say anything to me, because like I said before, I will eat you alive. But anyway, so the first thing we need to talk about is, okay, we know if we were to divide humanity up into race, and I really, don't want to get into all of that, but it's pertinent for this conversation because we have to think about who is it that controls the global market, the global media, the educational system, who controls the resources, or so they think anyway. It's those of the genetically recessive uh, race. It's those who are the youngest beings on the planet. So a lot of times when we're talking about timelines and things like this, you have to realize that things have been condensed and crunched down to make sense for their lifetime, so to speak. Now, those of us who are heavily melanated, I'll put it that way, those of us who are heavily melanated have been here for quite some time. There's actually a debate going on now as if life started in South America, or the original out of Africa theory, or actually now they're trying to say in Australia. So I mean, I'm not here to dispute any one of those three things, but what I can say is at the end of the day, whoever started it was genetically dominant, and they looked like me. So I don't really care, continent wise, where it all started. I think a lot of people are attached to the continent of Africa, but that's dangerous because this whole entire thing was ours. So please don't forget that. But the people that we're talking about that educated us, the people who were over our schools and even our universities that decide whether or not we can eat, sometimes they have had a very short span on the planet. You know what I mean? So a lot of times you'll hear, you'll turn on the Discovery Channel and they'll tell you that the Sphinx and the pyramids were built around the same time, which can't be true because the Sphinx has a water line on it. That area of Africa has not been like subtropical for, I'm gonna be nice and say at least 6,000 years. That's being extremely nice. You could say 10, but the pyramids of Giza do not have the same water line. So this had to come after a completely different ecological age, you know what I mean? So this is the timeline that we're talking about here. Now, also, people ask me a lot, I have my notes right here, so don't get distracted if I look away, but people ask me a lot, well, if our ancient cultures were so amazing, then what happened? How did they get caught up? How did we get enslaved? How did all these things happen? It's simple. It happened because we said so. It happened because we allowed it to happen. Now, this is the part where I usually lose people, but I don't care. So this is what it is. Now, we all sit here and we talk about these laws of the universe and yada, 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 all of this shit, right? Well, one of those laws is the law of rhythm. Everything that goes up must come down. Civilizations that rise must one day fall. If we still are the ultimate alchemists of the universe, you don't think we had a total and complete understanding of these 7 Hermetic laws. Now, granted, they're called the 7 Hermetic laws after Hermes, who was the European version of Tahuti, the god of wisdom and high magic as well, actually. But so I'm just using the word Hermetic for reference point for those who know what I'm talking about. But there's these 7 laws, and one of them is the law of rhythm. What goes up must come down. Every civilization that rises must one day fall. So we always have had prophecy that spoke about the day where we would one day rise from the ashes. The whole idea of the phoenix and all of that, it comes from you. It comes from me. It comes from us. So you don't think our ancestors knew these sort of things? First of all, when you think about the strong arm in white society, eventually you'll have to come across Freemasonry and Masonry and all of that, which we're now learning is just a knockoff of protocol in the mystery schools of Kemet. Kemet, now when I talk about Kemet, I don't talk about Kemet like it's the only great civilization we ever had. Because it wasn't. There was Nubia before that. There was the Congo. There was the Songhai dynasty, which those of us who did come over here on a boat, which is very few, those of us who did come from the mainland of Africa on a boat came from the Songhai dynasty. So it's not as if Kemet is the only place. Kemet is the most romanticized place because they couldn't hide that one. They couldn't burn that one down. You know what I mean? They couldn't try to pretend that one didn't exist and let trees grow over it like a lot of our things that we have in Asia and even Mexico as well. But you have to think about the fact that what the hell was I just talking about? Yeah, so people ask about these great civilizations and how did they fall and all of this and all of that, and it didn't. Not per se, not in the way that you think. This is an extreme case of what I call genetic alchemy. Now, one thing you have to, let's be real, like the ancestors were not perfect people. A lot of times we get a very romanticized view of them and their teachings and the culture and stuff like that because we're looking at it in retrospect. But you need to understand that there were a lot of problems then too. And one of the biggest problems that we know about anyway is the I don't want to say suppression of knowledge, but in a way it was because the knowledge, the keys to the universe were held for those in high regard of the priesthoods. And not all of them, but this is what you see during the fall of Kemet. You see a lot of priests and priestess who seem to be going against Kemetic culture at that time. Excuse me. So what you see is there is a they were holding a lot of information at the tippy top, and that's why Ptolemy and all those other Europeans that ended up marching their behinds into Kemet, and you know us trying to assume the throne and trying to muscle their way into the mystery schools, and that's when our priesthood split up, and you have a lot of them who are actually showing up now and coming out with the knowledge, and it's really amazing to see. But this is why those Europeans did that, because that's where the knowledge was. But therein lies the problem. Because if the knowledge is being held for certain people, this is the hierarchy. You got the priesthood, you have the pharaoh, then you have those people who are in the mystery schools, and then you have the regular everyday people who, at that time, during the fall of consciousness and the fall of Kemet, they are looking at it like it's a regular religion. They are going to temples just like, you know, we still do today, and they're praising Heru as opposed to saying, you know, Jesus, and they're praying to Aset as opposed to praying to Muhammad or Alat, who is the original goddess form of Allah, because that's just another patriarchal religion, but I'll get into that in a later video. But you see that the knowledge was kept for certain people. Now, in magical terms, and even in a lot of old, and I'm talking, the Emerald Tablets are 36,000 years old. I just actually got in contact with a guy who is an inductee of the Dogon tribe. Now, what most people don't realize about the Dogons is Dogons are not just located in Mali. Dogon is a name for those who uphold the tradition and the knowledge of the priesthoods of Kemet. So when you hear Dogon, it doesn't necessarily mean those guys in Mali. Those are just the only ones that talk to you. Those are not the only ones that are around. But the knowledge was held from the priesthood, the pharaoh, the mystery schools, into finally into the regular citizens. But the problem is, in all of these older spiritual and magical communities, is one thing that is known, one thing is understood, that divine intellect and understanding